Our next guest will weigh in on the Iran war, energy prices, and much more. Joining us right now is White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. And Kevin, good morning to you. How are
Becky.
you?
I'm doing well.
Let's talk a little bit about the situation in the Middle East, what's happening in Iran, and what that means for oil prices and maybe inflation longer term. We have seen prices spike. They came back down yesterday. But there are many questions about how long this will last, how long the Strait of Hormuz will be closed. And I just wonder how you're starting to figure this out, how you're starting to try and anticipate what that will mean for prices.
Yeah, well, we are basically getting briefed on every nuance of the war every day and then thinking through the economic implications. We have an enormous amount of success so far in the sense that we've destroyed the military of Iran. We've coordinated 135 countries in the UN, including no veto for China and Russia to isolate Iran. And we've coordinated a strategic reserve release of 35 countries, which could go up if it needs to. The bottom line is that the timeline that President Trump has stated over and over is that it's a 4 to 6 week war, and that we're ahead of schedule. And so already you're seeing tankers are starting to dribble through the straits. And I think it's a sign of how little Iran has left. And so I think we're very optimistic that this is going to be over in the short run. And then there'll be price repercussions when it is over for a few weeks as the ships make it to the refineries and so on. But we've really got a plan for every corner of the disruption, from fertilizer to getting fuel to the West Coast and so on. And we're highly confident that we've got this thing under control and that it'll end soon.
Let's talk that through. When you say end soon, you think a matter of weeks, not months?
Correct. That's right.
And when that happens, where do you expect, let's just say WTI? I mean, we can talk through any of the energy prices, but most of the analysts that we've had on, and granted, they're all kind of dealing with the fog of war, trying to figure it out themselves, have said that they don't think prices will come back down to the 60s anytime soon. Do you? Is that in your forecast?
Oh, if you look at futures markets, they've got them going down into the 60s again by the fall, and I think that's relatively pessimistic.
75 was what the WTI was for the December contract yesterday.
It goes all the way down to the 50s past the year, and so I think that you've got to understand that there's going to be we believe, an incredible risk premium for ending the terrorism, really, of the Iranians. The way I like to think about it, Becky, is that if you go back to 1975, Iran was the 18th largest economy on Earth. Now it's something like the 50th largest economy on Earth. They've destroyed their own country, but they've also discouraged investment in the entire Gulf region. I mean, don't forget that it's not just the Iranians, right? The Yemenis have been, charging people blackmail to move their ships around. And so we're moving towards a world where the energy of the Middle East is accessible through free markets without extortion. And that's going to be a place where there's more investment and more oil, and it's going to drive oil prices down in the long run. But the final thing is that the U.S. economy is still, through this, fundamentally strong, that we're still seeing strong signs of productivity growth. We had the Business Roundtable CEOs in town in Washington about a week ago, and everybody was talking about how solid things look. And so the other thing to mention is that Iran's strategy appeared to be that they could hurt the U.S. economy, and then that would make President Trump slow down. In fact, they're not hurting the U.S. economy very much at all. While gas prices are higher, the economy as a whole is sound. And there's no way that President Trump's going to back down until he sees this through to the end.
What does that mean, sees this through to the end, meaning regime change,
well,
meaning
he
the
will
Strait
decide,
is reopened?
But he wants to make sure that Iran cannot harm its neighbors and the U.S. ever again. And so he's destroyed the Navy, destroyed the Air Force, finished off most of the missile sites, and we want to know for sure that Iran is not going to challenge the world again with terrorism. And once we have a sense that we've accomplished that goal, we've defanged them, then President Trump will make the call on his own that the war is over.
Kevin, certainly we're in a better position than a lot of our European or Asian other Asian countries are, because they're so much more reliant on energy coming through the Strait of Hormuz. What kind of pressure do you think, A, they will put on us politically, and B, what kind of pricing increases might we anticipate from things that we import from those nations?
Yeah, well, one of the things that you know, Becky, we've talked about it before on the show, is that the U.S. is a net exporter of oil and finished product, but that we have pockets of the country, especially California, Alaska, the East Coast, where they're importing oil in part because of the Jones Act, which we just don't have enough U.S.-made vessels to move the oil around. And so I think that one of the concerns, which we're following very, very closely, is that the Asian economies, which are much more reliant on Middle East oil, they actually sell a lot of refined product in to the west coast of the U.S., and we're seeing some signs that they might be pulling that back to make sure that they have enough energy for themselves. And we've got a plan for that, and we're studying it closely. And we haven't seen disruptions yet, but that's the kind of thing that isn't going to happen in the U.S. because we have such sound energy production, but does mean that we might have to move a few chips on to different parts of the board.
Kevin, you know, when you think about the president has now postponed this meeting with President Xi in China, and I think one of the big questions is what the impact you think is going to of what's happening on the Straits is ultimately going to be on the Chinese economy, to the extent that when they get a cold, we get a cold.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's interesting, but, you know, the Chinese didn't veto the UN resolution condemning Iran. The Chinese are highly reliant on Iranian oil. And frankly, if the Iran problem goes away, it will be helpful for China as well. And so I think that in this is one case where the objectives of both countries are aligned, that we want, you know, a stable world oil market. And I think that President Trump and President Xi are good friends, and that, you know, when this war is over, which will be sometime soon, I'm sure they'll get together and have a lot to talk about. And hopefully the Chinese will express some gratitude for what President Trump has done.
When you math out the possibilities within your own group about the economy and this impact here, and you say it's going to end sometime soon, what does that look like? Do you say 10 days is one version, 30 days is another, 60 days is another, or are you on a different timeline completely?
Well, again, what we work off of is, first of all, what the president has said, which is that it's a 4 to 6 week program, and we're ahead of schedule, and we're in the third week. And so then you could say, call that a base case. But of course, you know, I get paid to worry. It's my job here in the White House. And then you think about, well, what if it's a little slower? We don't have much simulating to do if it's faster than that. But if it's a little bit slower, what happens then? But the fact is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, you know, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
Hey, Kevin, you mentioned that there are so many other things that come through the Strait of Hormuz that we do have concerns about. One would be fertilizer. Another would be helium, which is needed for the manufacturing of semiconductor chips. You said you have a plan. What is that plan to make sure that we are getting fertilizer to the proper places that it's needed? Because you can't get the fertilizer there late if you need to plant the crops.
Right. Well, the thing about fertilizer is that I know there are some people who live in fertilizer land on CNBC, but probably most people don't know about how fertilizer works in the U.S. But it's almost planting season, and there's a lot of fertilizer that usually goes down during planting season, including fertilizer that's based on ammonia and urea and nitrogen, and then there's potash that goes in as well, though the potash usually comes in the fall. And a lot of this stuff is made from liquid natural gas, and there's a facility in Qatar that produces so much fertilizer that it supplies maybe about 20% of the fertilizer in the U.S. And so what we've been doing really as an insurance policy against disruption is we've been finding other sources and doing so really quite successfully. We've put licenses, established licenses for Venezuela to produce more fertilizer. We've had discussions with Morocco, which has the largest reserve of potash anywhere on Earth. And so we've been all over the fertilizer problem. And I'm not saying that we can eliminate what disruption there is so far, but we can minimize it for sure.
And that would be available for U.S. farmers or available throughout the world? How does it work, and what's the time frame?
We're focused on U.S. farmers and getting stuff to the U.S. farmers. That's right.
But so you're convinced that
we've
this
identified the supplies that are disrupted from the Gulf and tried to successfully found alternative sources for a lot of it.